Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm making a more experimental video. Normally I just do playthroughs where, I play the game, see what emerges, and then try to talk about what I see as it shows up. But I think combat in Mage Knight is something that people have a lot of questions about, and I want to try to run through what the symbols mean and do a couple of basic demos of combat so you can kind of get a feel for what it's supposed to be like without waiting for it to show up in a playthrough. I'm just going to call this Dr. D Teaches because it's different from my normal playthroughs, which I call How to Solo. So we'll just give it a different name. I'm a teacher. My teacher name is Dr. D. So we'll roll with it. And hopefully this little experiment will be helpful. I think for this video, what I'm going to focus on is doing combat by yourself and doing combat against single enemies. So what that means is that cities and multi-attacks are going to be saved for another video. And then I might do a separate one for combat using units, because I think that that's its own thing sometimes. And I'll also do one about wounds and healing, so that theoretically I've created some resources for you to go to and see what you were looking for. Of course, I'm just one person, and I'm basically just going through what I know about combat, and that means that it won't be comprehensive. If you have a very specific issue, especially one that's emerged in your gameplay, I actually recommend that you take a picture of the game state, go to Mage Knight board game on Facebook, and join that group and ask the people in there your question, because honestly, there's someone in that group who can answer anything, and it's super impressive, and I've got a lot out of that group myself just from having it show up in my feed. But if you want an overview of the stages of combat and what does that symbol mean, then this is the video for you. So I hope you enjoy it. So this is an artificial gameplay where I'm not going to be worrying about correct movement or anything. I'm actually just going to walk you through some of these enemy tokens and talk to you about their special abilities, how battle works, and some special cases that you might run into. So let's start with a super vanilla enemy piece, and that would be these orc prowlers here. There's nothing special about them. They have no special abilities, so we're going to be able to just go over here and talk about how they work. And for those of you who are just learning Mage Knight, just so you know, this symbol is going to signify a rampaging orc enemy, and it will match this sword on the back of the orc tokens. So you never need to worry about what goes where, it will match. And because these are rampaging enemies, you automatically get to see what they are day or night, because it mimics the locals kind of telling you what's there so you can do some damage. So let's say that Goldix is here magically. He flew here. In a regular game you have to pay cards to move, but I'm not bothering with that right now. So now we are going to challenge this rampaging orc. So there are a couple of different ways to get into it with a rampaging enemy. You can stand adjacent to them and just be like, I want to fight for your action. That's fine. Or since I'm here, you can also provoke one by moving from a space that's adjacent to it to another space that's adjacent to it. So I can either just be like, I'm gonna fight this guy and go for it, or I can move here because this was next to him and then this is next to him. So he'll be like, hey, what are you doing? And fight. Or I can do that in this direction and also provoke a fight. So good times. Let's say that we are going to fight this orc. So why don't I zoom in and we'll walk through the 4 steps of combat. All right, so now we're in the great battle between Goldix and this orc, and there are 3 numbers in the token that you need to pay attention to. The number at the top is the amount of damage that you need to do to this unit to beat it. So in this case, 3. The fist to the left side is the amount of damage that this enemy will do to you if it hits you. And the number at the bottom represents the amount of fame that you'll gain if you win. So now let's walk through the 4 stages of combat in this game, and we'll get into more detail as we go, but for now I'm just teaching you there are 4 stages. I personally feel like if we get into all the details right away, everybody will just end up sad. All right, so let's say that this is Goldix's hand. We're gonna work with the cards that I have here to talk about what we might do to this enemy. Stage 1 of any combat in Mage Knight is the ranged attack phase. This is your chance to kill an enemy before it has a chance to hit you. So if you can get a lot of ranged attack, sometimes that's awesome because it allows you to beat up an enemy before taking a wound. Here the amount of damage I need to do this unit is 3. So if I have a red mana, I could just end this fight right here with this ranged fire attack 3. So if I already had a red crystal in my inventory, I could pull it out, boom, firebolt, enemy is defeated. So the whole battle could have just ended during the ranged attack phase. Let's say, however, that I have not been so wise with my resources and I do not have a red crystal. We're going to skip the ranged phase and we're going to move on to the block phase. One thing I think is worth mentioning is that if I needed more than 3 to kill this unit, this ranged attack would be completely useless. In a game of Mage Knight, you either meet the total that you need to destroy a unit, or you just do nothing. I can't, for example, do 2 ranged attack and reduce this from 3 to 1 for the next round of fighting. That's not possible. This is an all or nothing game. So if you don't have enough ranged attack to take out an enemy, don't bother, save it for the attack round, which we'll talk about in a moment. So let's say that I did not manage to defeat this enemy in this stage. Now, the enemy is going to get a chance to hit us. If you don't take something out during the ranged phase, then it gets to hit you before you get to hit it. So get ready, because we've gone from the ranged attack phase to the block phase. In the block phase, if I don't want to get hit, I need to generate 4 block in order to block this enemy's attack. One thing I can do is play Rage for block 2. However, this block 2 is still not 4. Again, Mage Knight is an all or nothing game, so I either block the entire amount of the damage or I block none of it. 2 block is not enough. Another thing that I could do is I can play cards sideways to generate block. So I could play Tranquility sideways, and I could play Threaten sideways to get a total of 4 block. 2 for Rage, 3, 4. So let's say that I managed to do that in order to block this enemy's attack. That was the block phase. If I had not produced these cards, then I would get wounded, but I'm actually going to talk about wounding and healing in a separate video because I don't want to get too bogged down. So we have successfully blocked the enemy attack. If we didn't, we would take wounds. So let's move these off to the side. The third phase of attack is something that we'll also discuss when I talk about wounds and healing, because that is the assign damage phase. So we're going to skip that for now, and I'll talk about wounds separately so I don't overload you with information. But suffice it to say that you get hit before you get to attack. And now we're in just what is called the attack phase of combat. Again, we need a total of 3 attack to take out this enemy, and there are a couple ways that I could do that. I think what I'd like to do, however, is I want to play Improvisation. It allows me to discard another card from my hand to gain move 3, influence 3, attack 3, or block 3. So since attack 3 is one of the options, let's just discard Crystal Joy in order to get the attack 3 of Improvisation. So that attack 3 is enough to meet or beat the attack value of this unit. So it will be defeated, you will take it off the board, and you will collect 2 fame on your fame tracker, which will help contribute to leveling up. And that is a full journey through combat. We had a ranged attack phase, we had a block phase, we would have assigned damage had there been any, and then we attacked. And that is how standard combat works in this game. Another thing to note is that if for some reason I had wanted to just play this during the attack phase instead of the ranged phase, I could have used this card to kill this unit in both the ranged attack phase and the regular attack phase. Ranged attack counts as just normal attack during the attack phase. So it's special in that you could use it early potentially, but if you don't have enough ranged attack to use it during the ranged attack phase, you can fold it into the rest of your attack during the attack phase. All right, now you've been through one just kind of vanilla attack round, but now things are going to get exciting. Each of these other rampaging orc tokens has a special ability, and we're going to talk through what each of those abilities means so that when you play, you know exactly what you're looking at. As usual, this token has the numbers that I told you to look out for on it. The amount of damage you have to do to it, the amount of damage that it can do to you, and the amount of fame you get for beating it up. However, it also has this special little icon right here that looks like a little hang glider or like a bird with a really skinny tail. I'm not sure. An umbrella. It means that this token has the Swift ability. And what the Swift ability means is that if you can't take it out with ranged, then to block it, you need twice as much block as its attack value. So if you recall, with those regular old Prowlers, they had an attack 4, and we had to just generate 4 block in order to prevent the attack. What the Swift ability is going to do is it's going to force us to try to create more block in order to block an attack. Otherwise, we're just going to have to eat that attack. So, although their attack value is 3, because they have the Swift ability, in order to block that attack at 3, you're going to have to produce 6 block instead. So let's walk through combat again. I'm just going to keep this same hand of cards and show you how much or little I'm able to do with it. So once again, we have our ranged attack phase. I only have one card that could possibly give me any ranged attack at all, and it's for 3. None of the other cards in this hand discuss ranged attack at all, and I'm not pretending that I have any skills or extra stuff because we're keeping this pretty bare bones. So I don't have enough ranged attack. The ranged attack phase is just going to pass. Maybe I could fold this into my overall damage in the next round, depending on what else I choose to do. Now we're in the block phase, and again, this enemy has the swift ability, so it's going to hit me for 3 if I cannot block it for 6. So in order to block it, I would need to generate 6 block. Let's just assume that I'm committed to doing that. So we're going to go ahead and use Rage again for block 2. And then let's say this time I'm going to play Improvisation for 3 block, which means I have to discard a card. Let's dump Crystal Joy. That puts me at 5 block. And then I have to put another card sideways. So that's 6 block that would block this attack for 3. If we didn't manage to block it, we would just take damage for 3, which isn't that bad. As I'll show you in my wounds video, this is blocked. So we'll skip the assigned damage phase because no damage was assigned, and then we have to hit this guy for 4. Let's pretend that I do have a red mana crystal because otherwise it would not be possible. We're going to do this ranged attack 3 and power it with this red crystal to enable me to use this more powerful ability on the card. Then we're going to play Threaten sideways for 1 more physical attack. So range fire attack of 3, 1, 2, 3, 1 more attack, 4 meets 4, and we killed this enemy. So using the 6 cards in that hand, I've managed to both block any damage and do just enough damage to this guy to kill him. So let's talk about our friends the Ironclads, who have a few special things about them. They have their normal 3 stat numbers, so the amount of damage they need to take to die, the amount of damage they can do to you if you don't block them, and the amount of fame you get if you beat them up. However, they also have this nasty looking red skull on them, which means that they have the brutal ability. And if you look closely, there's another little symbol right here, and it looks like a fist. That means that they are resistant to physical attacks. So we're going to talk about our very first resistance right now. So first, let's have a quick chat about the brutal ability. So what this red skull means is that if you do not block this attack, it will go through as double its value. When we had an enemy with the swift ability, what that meant was that you had to block 6 to prevent 3 damage. With an enemy that has brutal, you have to block 4, because if you don't, you're going to take 8 damage. So basically, blocking 4 might not seem so bad, but if you fail to do it, this thing is going to hit you for double. So when you see an enemy that has brutal, do try to block it. It's very well worth your time. The other thing that it has going on up here is that little symbol with a fist that means that it has physical resistance. What physical resistance means in the game is that physical attacks, including cards you play sideways, are what is called inefficient. And what that means is that they do half the damage that they normally would. Let's just assume that we block this guy and then look through our cards for damage. So for example, I need to hit 3 attack here. Here we have Rage, which is attack or block 2. This attack 2 is a physical attack, unless it says that it's a fire attack, an ice attack, or a cold fire attack, which are your other options. It is physical. If it doesn't modify the word attack in any way, it is a physical attack. So what that means is that this attack 2 is inefficient against this enemy. So instead of counting for 2, it's only to count for 1. If you power it with a red crystal, let's just pretend that we have one, this attack 4 is really only good for attack 2, and you need to get to 3. So what that means is that if you wanted to use this card to kill this enemy, you would still need to play 2 more sideways cards to generate that 1 more damage that you need to take this guy out. Because physical attack is not an efficient attack against this enemy. However, that's also where our lovely Firebolt comes in. A fire attack is not a physical attack, it is a different type of attack. So if you have a red crystal to power a fire attack of 3, this normal number of 3 will take out this enemy because it had physical resistance, but it was not resistant to fire. So as you encounter more enemies, you're going to encounter different combinations of resistances that you have to pay attention to as you play, because they can add a lot of challenge and change the way that you choose to play your cards in your hand when you fight. This lovely enemy right here is an Orc Summoner, and you might notice that his stat numbers are different because you have a number that you need to hit him for to beat him, you have the amount of fame that you get for defeating him, but this isn't a number. This is an image that's on the back of another type of enemy. It's on these brown enemy tokens right here. So when you encounter a summoner, what happens is that during their phase where they get to attack you, so basically during the block phase, they summon a little friend to help them, and you don't actually know how much you're going to have to block. So what that's ultimately going to mean is that let's say that we have our ranged attack phase. We don't have enough ranged attack to take out an enemy for 4. We only have that ranged attack 3 card in our hand. So we're going to have to skip the ranged attack phase. Now we're going to move into the block phase where he gets to attack us. So he's going to summon a creature to come and mess with us. And that creature is going to be, you just pull one of these at random, a werewolf. So basically what's going to happen is that instead of attacking us with his own innate value, this werewolf is going to attack us for 7. And in order to prevent 7 damage from going through, we're going to need to generate 14 block because this werewolf has the swift ability. So the summoner basically punched us really, really hard during the block phase. Unless we had 14 block, which we distinctly do not in this hand, we would have to take 7 damage and it would hurt. So in the hand that I've been playing with, there's absolutely no way to generate enough block for this. You get smacked, and then the summoned creature that the Orc Summoner brought into play disappears after the block phase. And then you go back after you take your wounds into the attack phase. So now I can just generate 4 attack and kill this guy, but not before he did a bunch of damage to me with the creature that he summoned. These lovely ladies here are the Orc Hags. And again, they have your usual stat arrangement. So you have to hit them for 5 to kill them. They attack you for 3, so you only have to block 3. And then you get 3 fame for defeating them. However, they also have this sickly little green icon here in the corner. And what that means is that they have the poison ability. So if you get hurt by a hag who has a poison ability, not only do you take a wound into your hand, but then there's an extra wound that gets added to your discard pile. So basically you get double hurt by a poison icon. If you choose to assign damage to your units, which is something we're going to talk about when we talk about damage, then the unit actually also has to take 2 wound cards and you have to heal it twice before you can use it again. So essentially a poison hit that goes through that you don't block means double damage to you or to the unit that you give that damage to. Poison is nasty. And last but not least, and I think this is a nice transition because we're going to be talking shortly about more fortified enemies, we have some diggers. So once again, they have the normal configuration of stats. Hit them for 3, block them for 3, get 2 fame. But here, right here on this token, there's a little castle right next to that 3 up there on the top. And that means that these guys are what is called fortified. Fortification doesn't really affect most phases of the battle, but it does affect your ranged attack phase. So you might have remembered that we had a firebolt in our hand that, powered with this red mana crystal, gave us ranged fire attack 3. However, that does not help us against this enemy because he is fortified. There's a different kind of ranged attack called siege attack, and that is what you need to hit a fortified enemy during the ranged attack phase. So the way to solve this problem would be, so see how we have Firebolt here? If instead we had Crushing Bolt and a green mana, we would then be able to do Siege Attack 3, and that would take out this enemy even though it has a fortification. So during the ranged attack phase, pay attention because Siege Attack can hit a fortified enemy, ranged attack can't. The other thing that's fun about siege attack and range attack is that if you can't use them during the range attack phase, you get through the block phase, and then these both just count as regular old damage during the regular old attack phase. So they're not useless if you can't use them right at the beginning of a fight. All right, so now I want to widen the map, both literally, as you can see, and figuratively in terms of talking about combat, to include some new enemy types, which are the enemies at Mage Towers and the enemies at Keeps. The reason I've chosen to do this is because we need to talk about some more powerful special abilities, which we're going to get to, but also there are some tactical and movement related issues when it comes to combat. The orcs are what are called rampaging enemies, and what they do is they rampage across the country. You always know what they are, and if you move from a space that's adjacent to one to another space that's adjacent, you will provoke it to attack. So for example, that would provoke an attack, this would provoke an attack. Basically, you can't just move through them with impunity. However, there are other enemies that are stationary, and those are your Mage Towers and your Keeps. So Mage Towers and Keeps always come out onto the board face down. You do not just get to know what they are. It is a surprise. So it's a surprise that you can see during the day if you get within one space. So now that I've kind of crept up here, if it's daytime, we get to flip it and see who's home. If it were nighttime, I would have to just make a decision whether to attack or not and hope for the best, which is how you get creamed in this game, but it's fun. This keep would normally stay, and then like the Mage Tower, this keep would remain a mystery unless I was within one space of it during the day, or decided to just march right up to it at night and have a fight. The other thing that is worth noting is that you can't attack a keep or a Mage Tower from the space adjacent to it. So if I'm here somehow, I would be permitted to attack this rampaging enemy from the space that I'm in. I'd be permitted to attack this rampaging enemy from the space that I'm in. And in fact, I can choose to attack both of these rampaging enemies from the space that I'm in, which I will discuss later because I don't want to talk about attacking two things at once just now. I want to make sure I've walked through all the basics and then we'll get there. So from here, I can attack one or both of these guys. I cannot attack this Mage Tower. To attack the Mage Tower, I have to actually generate the movement, the desert movement, to walk in there and have a fight. The other thing that's very interesting is that remember how I told you that you can't move from one adjacent to an orc space to another adjacent to an orc space without provoking an attack? That's right. That means to attack this Mage Tower, I'd either have to knock this orc out on the turn before, or I'd have to actually walk into the Mage Tower and then fight both of these enemies at the same time, thus leading to another multi-enemy attack. The other thing worth noting spatially is that not only do you have to go up into one of these spaces for a Mage Tower or a keep to attack, but these are considered fortified because they are in a tower. So these guys don't have fortifications unless there's a special symbol, but these guys, Mage Towers, keeps, cities, you can assume to be fortified because they're in fortified buildings that you're attacking from outside. But for now, I'm just going to look at some of these tokens and we're going to get into their special abilities because they are in fact special and worth being afraid of. So now this is a great time to talk about a few more special resistances and attack types. So all the attacks you've seen so far have been physical attacks, which is symbolized by this fist right here. And the only resistance that you've seen has also been a physical resistance, again symbolized by a fist. However, there's also three other types of attack in the game. There are ice attacks, which can be shown by this icy 5 right here. It's definitely not a fist, it's a hunk of ice. There are fire attacks, which I'll show you one in a moment, and there are also what are called cold fire attacks, which somehow manage to be both fire and ice attacks at the same time. I'm still wrapping my head around that. So this ice mage right here both uses ice attacks and has a resistance to ice attacks. And I'm going to talk about what both of those things mean right now. So remember when we talked about efficiency? Efficiency can come into play both when you're attacking and when you are blocking. Here we have ice resistance, and what that means is that any ice attacks that you might have in your hand are going to be considered inefficient and they're only going to count for half. Physical attacks are still normal, so what that's going to mean is that physical attacks are still going to count for their normal value, so attack 2. And fire attacks are also going to count for their normal value. Those are fine. It's just that ice attacks, if you have a card that says ice attack instead of fire attack, it's only going to have half of its value against this enemy. So if it were ice attack 2 instead of regular attack 2, this would only go through for 1. Ice resistance also means that this enemy is impervious to the effects of cards that are powered by blue mana. So for example, if I had a card in my hand like Shield Blast, which you can power with a blue mana, it not only counts twice against an attack with swiftness, but it says a blocked enemy gets armor -1 for each point of block higher than needed when you block it. However, in the case of this Ice Mage, its armor would not get reduced because this is a card that's powered by blue mana and it is allowed to ignore the effects of blue cards or unit abilities that are powered by it. So if you went in here hoping to strip away some armor, oops, you got an Ice Mage instead. So while this ice resistance means that this enemy is resistant to ice attacks from you, this number over here, the fact that it does ice attacks, actually means a different set of things that I'm going to walk you through now. So when you are attacked by an ice attack, this is a very powerful attack. And what that means is that your physical block and your ice block are not considered efficient against the attack. So let's say that I decided to try to block 2 to work on my defense against this ice attack. This only counts as block 1 because physical block is not efficient against ice attack. It is just too cold for you. If you have ice block, that also is not efficient and will be worth half value. So what it's ultimately going to come down to is that in order to block against this attack, unless you manage to put 5 fire block together, all of your physical block is only worth half, so you're going to have to generate 10 of it, or your ice block is only worth half, so you'd have to generate 10 of that. So the basic upshot of an ice attack is that unless you manage to put together 5 fire block, you're going to end up having to spend a lot of extra block in order to fend off this attack. Here we have a fire mage. This is basically the fire version of the ice mage. So what that would mean is that this ranged fire attack is really only worth like 1 because you would round down, but physical attacks and fire attacks will work just fine. On the blocking, basically you would need to have ice block in order to block a fire attack. Fire block and physical block are inefficient, and you'd have to generate 12 of those to block this attack, whereas you only need 6 ice block. And then of course things get very crazy when you come across the cold fire attack. This is the Draconum. So we've talked about rampaging enemies. The ones that we've gone over so far together are orcs. There's one other type of rampaging enemy, and that is a Draconum. This one is particularly nasty because he has both fire and ice resistances, and he does a cold fire attack. So what this means is that this dragon has both fire and ice resistances, so your fire attacks are halved, your ice attacks are halved, and your cold fire attacks are halved. So you can physically beat this guy up, but if you have a bunch of special attacks, then you will be sad. Cold fire attack also does a lot to your block, because it means that unless you have cold fire block specifically, then you're going to have to generate a lot of block to block this hit. So physical block, inefficient, going to be halved. Fire block, inefficient, halved. Ice block, also inefficient, halved. So unless you've got 6 cold fire block hanging around in your hand, this dude's going to hit you. And he's got brutal, which means he's going to hit you for 12. So in a game of Mage Knight, do not play around with Draconum. So Mage Towers are where you're going to find usually the really crazy fire, ice, and cold fire attacks. Keeps play around with Fortification, and that's something that they do that is special. So as we discussed, when you attack a keep or a mage tower, you assume that they are fortified just because they're in a keep or a mage tower. Fortification makes sense. And in the case of an enemy being fortified, you need to use siege attack, not ranged, during the ranged attack phase if you want to make progress against that enemy. However, it is also possible for an enemy to be double fortified. So for example, this is a keep enemy with a keep on the back that also has a fortification castle symbol on it. What that means is that this enemy is going to be what's considered double fortified. And that means that you can't do anything to this guy during the range attack phase. Range attacks definitely don't work, and also siege attacks do not work. You're just going to have to get through the block phase and save it for the attack phase if you want to get this guy. This one, on the other hand, see this castle with an X through it? That means that this enemy is unfortified, which is pretty cool because you can ignore the fortification effects of it being at a keep. However, in this case, this one has another special symbol to make up for it and still be annoying to you. This little smoky looking bit of armor with a higher number on it means that this enemy has something called elusive. So an elusive enemy generally is going to have increased armor value. So this is its base armor value, but most of the time you don't get to use it. You only use this lower value in the attack phase, and also only if you successfully blocked all enemy attacks. If you meet those conditions, then you can use the lower armor value. But the odds are high that you're going to be going up against this guy as if he has 6 armor instead of 3. Then when you move away from the mage towers and the keeps into these brown adventure site enemies, things get even crazier. I'm going to run through these fairly quickly. Other than Paralysis, I don't really think that too many of these feature in the base game, but we're going to just talk about it. So, Paralysis first, since that's the one that you could run into. There are some pretty nasty creatures in all versions of this game, base and expansions, that can paralyze you. So if you fail to block an attack from an enemy that has the paralyze ability, if you assign it to a unit, that unit just dies. You have no chance to heal it. And if you assign that damage to yourself, that forces you to throw away every single non-wound card in your hand. In other words, it completely screws up your attempt to attack anything, and you will leave in shame with some wounds to show for it. So watch out for Paralysis. Here are some other more special ones. This rock right here basically means cumbersome. What it allows you to do is during the block phase, you can also spend move points. And then for each move point that you spend, then the enemy's attack is reduced by 1 for the rest of the turn. So basically you can use move points to block or reduce the attack of this enemy because this one is like very big and rocky and slow. So that's what that would represent. Here we have a vampire. So he has the vampiric ability, which looks like a gross vampire fang. So basically what Vampiric will do is that for every wound it causes, its armor value up here goes up because, you know, it's hurting you, it's drinking blood, it's getting really excited and empowered by that, so it becomes stronger. So it's definitely something to watch out for. This dude right here has something called Arcane Immunity. So what that's ultimately going to end up meaning is that you will ignore any effects that would just destroy an enemy. You also can't do things like prevent it from attacking or reduce its armor. However, your attacks and blocks will work normally, and you can do things that let you, say, reduce an enemy attack, because that would directly affect attack. Also fun is this little knife here. It's an assassination ability, and basically what it means is you can't assign damage from this enemy to your units. You have to assign it to your hero, so Goldix would have to eat that even if I had a bunch of recruits. As you delve into the expansions, you're also going to run into enemies that do things like attack you twice, which we're going to talk about kind of grouped in with group attacks, so wait on that. That will give you reputation bonuses or reductions when you beat them, along with the fame that you get, and that have an interesting ability called Defense. So this is from the Shades of Tesla expansion. Basically, if these guys were attacking together, you could choose to attack one enemy first, and this one would either keep his defense bonus for himself, thus effectively having an armor of 6, or he would give it to his ally, who would then have that +1 point for an effective armor of 5. So basically, as you play more expansions, the icons on these enemies get crazier, but you shouldn't start here. Just start with the base game stuff, and you will be just fine. And that is my first attempt at a quick and efficient overview of some of the combat symbols and their meanings in Mage Knight. I hope that this was helpful to you. I am planning to do more videos in this vein, as well as some playthroughs, because while I'm on Mage Knight, I might as well just stay there and work through it. If you appreciate my work, please do like and subscribe, and happy gaming.